What's up, brothers? Hope you're great. How's everyone doing? Got a question already. Let's answer it. Afternoon. What do you think about topical DHEA on the scrotum? Mic check, mic check, mic check. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you? Can you actually hear me? Can you hear me? Are you hearing me? Hope so. I don't really see a need for that. Listen, I guess if there is some better absorption of DHEA through, scrotal application, then I think that would be fine. I don't see a particular need for that. I think the best things to be rubbing on the scrotum or that are, it's just a better fit because of the absorption, and in the case of cream, because of the DHT conversion, would be cream and actual DHT itself. Now I have never, to my knowledge, with the exception of putting DHT on like the perineum, I've never rubbed actual DHT on the scrotum. For me, I somehow thought like that might not be a good idea, or that just wouldn't be particularly useful or whatever. So instead, I just would rub it on the shaft, and that's basically, these days I use 0.25 mil every third day or something on the shaft, and that's just perfect. I had to figure out that dose over time. So that's just kind of it. Test cream, DHT, those are the kind of things you want to put on the genitals. I'm not sure DHEA really belongs in that category. Let's talk about a couple things. As I've been talking about, I've been microdosing Anavar on and off. I've taken days off and kind of gone back on it and just trying to sort of feel what works for me. Interestingly, I have noticed that if I dose 2.5 milligrams, I've done that a couple times. If I dose 6 milligrams, I've done that many times. The benefit in terms of anabolism and like the powerful anabolic and energy effect from Anavar is still there. It's still there. Now, is it comparable, or is it going to be the same or as strong as 25 milligrams of Anavar? No, but I have pharmaceutical grade Anavar, and the shit is fucking potent. So I don't need a lot of it. At 100 milligrams a test a week, which is where I still am, I have not lost muscle mass. I've not lost strength. I feel fucking amazing in the gym. Just fucking incredible, especially on those Anavar days. Just incredible, even at microdoses. All right, so I just want to fill people in on that. I do not have to touch estrogen whatsoever on 100 milligrams a test. For me, over the last, many years, I enjoy higher doses of test for the anabolism and all the other benefits, but there's always manipulation of estrogen that needs to happen. Now, I figured that out. I can do that with a number of different things, but it is fun to not have to touch estrogen. In that regard, I've noticed that at 100 milligrams a test a week, I can dose like 350 IU of HCG every day. That's a lot of HCG. I mean, what are we talking about? Like 2,000 IU plus per week, right? And in doing that, it is not pushing estrogen up past the sexual zone, the sexual sweet spot, which is phenomenal. And I get all the benefits of HCG. HCG tends to really complicate people's protocols when there's already a lot of estrogen spillover, and then HCG is just adding fucking more of it. It just really complicates the protocol. Whereas if you're on a low enough test dose, but just barely enough there, and you add a bunch of HCG, I mean, I'm taking 350 or so IU the last few days, at least, every day, split up into 2 injections, basically like whatever that is, 150 or 175 or something in the morning, and then the same thing at like 5 p.m. And it's totally fun and not pushing the estrogen up. When I ran the experiment of going down to 70 milligrams a week, and I was running 125 IU of HCG every day, it did nothing to estrogen, didn't touch it at all. Didn't move it one bit. Just something to keep in mind. What's up, brother? Trey says we're loud and clear. All right. Tofton. Can I pin BPC 157 only 2 to 3 times a week? Just to try it out for minor X. I think so, totally. I mean, look, it's a reparative peptide that does a lot of work, and it's not just going to happen in some small acute effect duration window. It's going to be, it's going to induce reparative stuff at the site of the injury, which the effect, at least, that you'll get, because it's going to execute some repair work when you inject it, is going to be pretty long term. So I do not think that is a problem. You do not need to, like, again, with frequency, same thing with Anavar. Like, you don't need to dose Anavar every day to get the fucking powerful effect. You could dose it every other day, believe me. You could dose Anavar every other day, reduce the risk of fucking up your lipids. and, you know, elevating liver enzymes and whatever, and still get all the benefits from it. You really can. And it doesn't have to be a super high dose, so long as it's good quality Anavar. And I think the same thing is true for BPC 157. You know, when you see these schedules on the web that people on Reddit are like talking about, those aren't the only way to use any of these compounds. It's just not. You know, people don't even have to be on a schedule regarding test. You know, I mean, you could pin every other day, and then if you feel like the estrogen is getting a little too high, you take a 1 or 2 day break. You probably still feel fine, and then you pin again. You know, just ultimately do what works for you. Kind of creepy. Order 66, Brother PJ. Hey, Ryan, big ups. I'm going to start restarting TRT soon via cream. Recommended starting with scrotal application to body. I would say scrotal application would be the first thing to do. Yeah, listen. You know, it would be beneficial for you to dial in scrotal application of testosterone, you know, other than or before like having to rub it on your shoulders or something. You know, I just think you want to dial it in. You're going to get more systemic DHT conversion, and you're going to have to learn at that point, you know, how many pumps it takes. You know, where does that bring estrogen? Do you have to manipulate estrogen low or high in order to dial in further? You know, does that make it so that you need a little HCG or a little more HCG? Because sometimes all that DHT kind of tends to shut you down a little more. Believe it or not, this is the thing with cream that can happen at very high doses, especially. You're going to notice your testicles shrink faster, and that might mess with sexual function. In fact, it almost always does. So you're going to have to go through that process of figuring that out. You know, yeah. If cream is just, the application for cream is just disproportionately and regularly the scrotum. You know, yeah. If you're getting actual transscrotal cream. You know, doesn't mean it can't work elsewhere. I mean, I remember running like 5 pumps of cream a day. I was doing 3 in the morning and 2 in the evening, and that was all on the shoulders. And fuck, I was anabolic as shit. I felt energized as shit. You know, my testosterone was fucking pretty high. My DHT was sky high. You know, so like you're still going to get the conversion, but ultimately what ended up working out better for me was 3 pumps transscrotal cream in the morning transscrotally. That's it. You know, and a little bit of HCG, like 125 every day. And that was just perfect. You know, that just worked out perfect. So try to find the cream dose and apply it scrotally that works well for you. And I think, you know, right up into the sunset. Simon Stone. So this is a good question, right? And let's talk about this. Is there any libido benefits, or am I noticing any from dosing Anavar? I think we should answer the general question first. And the general question is, yes, anecdotally, let's talk about that first. Anecdotally, people dose Anavar and end up having fucking better libido, right? They just have the DHT-like libido, which makes you look at women or whatever you're interested in or your person in a much more viscerally aggressive way in terms of libido. Like you just kind of get aggressive. You know, when I have the DHT-like libido, the sex is aggressive. It's just more aggressive and that sort of thing. So that's what people report. Can I say that it's made a difference in that department? I can say that it hasn't hurt or harmed it, and I can't tell if it's making libido better or if it's negligible. But what's really making libido better is what's always made libido really great for me, which is estrogen in my zone. I mean, that's basically it. You know, I can have 700 tests, which is roughly where I'm at right now. But as long as estrogen's 25, 35, like my libido is great. You know, that's just it. So hard for me to tell. Also, I'm experimenting with more HCG because I have such a low dose of test at the moment at 100 milligrams a week that I can tolerate more HCG, and it's not taking estrogen, you know, out of my zone. I'm still in it, and I'm getting all the benefits from HCG. So my libido right now is very high and good. Erections are very good. And so, you know, for me, it's likely the low dose of test and enough HCG. The Anavar is really just kind of adding an extra element to anabolism. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you have another anabolic agent that is binding to the ARs, well, guess what? That's displacing, likely, at some ARs, testosterone, which means some of that testosterone is not going to get converted to estradiol. Potentially. At the same time, because Anavar will lower sex hormone binding globulin and free up some free hormones, it might end up giving you a little more free estradiol. So nobody really fucking knows the answer to that, but I haven't noticed a substantial difference, but some guys take Anavar and their libido is fucking crazy. And that would make sense considering that DHT at the ARs, or in this case, a DHT derivative, really does tend to elevate the libido. And I think that happens via neurological mechanisms, you know? So androgen receptor binding in the brain, which obviously has a very, very clear interplay with dopamine, which drives libido in men. You know, it's the androgen receptors in the brain, estrogen to an extent, but then dopamine. Hope that makes sense. Sammy, hey, Ryan, is taking 1,000 milligrams split AM and PM of calcium D-glucarate alone with 175 milligrams of Test E every 4th day enough without a Arimidex? Well, you're going to have to figure that out. I don't know, because people are different. I'm on 0.5 milligrams of Arimidex on shot day now and feel good, but I would like to stop if I can. I would tell you this. I would tell you, number one, don't stop taking the Arimidex if you're dialed in. I think that's first and foremost, right? I think that's a critical point. Everybody needs to understand, if you have a protocol that is working really well for you, don't change it. Don't change it. And, you know, if for some reason, like a health reason, or you want to take a drug holiday from Arimidex, it's got to be a good reason for you to fucking change a TRT protocol that is working. A real good reason. And don't be an experimenter. You know, I'm an experimenter because, you know, I like to learn stuff, and like I also like to have new topics for content. And so this whole, you know, 100 milligrams of test and low dose Anavar with a pretty high dose of HCG, this is an experiment, you know, to validate what I've seen in coaching over and over again, see if it works for me, and to test how much Anavar actually gives me anabolism where it's not like fucking causing problems with my lipids or anything else. So don't necessarily be an experimenter. If you're on 175 milligrams of Tessie every 4th day, I do not think 1,000 milligrams of calcium D-glucarate, you know, split AM and PM is going to do what 0.5 milligrams of Arimidex every 4th day is doing. That's just not possible. It's just not possible, man. So I don't mean to discourage you, and that doesn't mean that it won't cause, you know, it won't help at all. But in the end, first, the moment you stop Arimidex, you're going to get an estrogen rebound. That estrogen rebound is going to suck. You probably get anxiety. Your dick's going to start fucking not working as good. Your libido is probably going to, you know, shift a little bit. And if you can work through that and get to the point where with this calcium D-glucarate, you end up in a place where still things are like pretty okay and that's tolerable for you, great. But that first part is going to suck. Just keep that in mind. And no, 2 grams or 1 gram or 3 grams of CDG is just not comparable to 0.5 milligrams of Arimidex. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. The only way to probably make calcium D-glucarate work in this case here would be substantially lower the test dose. I mean, that's that. Then I think you could make it work. Levi, I'm on test prop 40 milligrams every other day. Interesting protocol. I'd be a little tired on day 2. I've run that before. A little tired on day 2. Pretty tired, actually, later in the day on day 2. But having intense hair loss. For PFS, will HCG monotherapy work, or should I just continue with prop? Well, you can't ask the question, for PFS, will one thing work? You know, I understand you haven't watched every piece of my content, but I need to make sure you PFS people understand that it's a complex condition in which you need a lot of different things. No, HCG monotherapy is not going to work for PFS. Yeah, you know, you need exogenous test. You need to find the right dose. You either have a high dose and manage estrogen with an AI or a DHT derivative, or you go ultra low dose, 100 milligrams a week, where you don't need to manage estrogen and you have some HCG in there. If over a long period of time that does not resolve the problems, or you can't get to the point where you've got libido interactions and everything's good, which you probably will on either one of those protocols, then that would be the time to bring in some exogenous DHT. Yeah. But HCG monotherapy is really, really not it. You're welcome, brother. I appreciate giving it. Red Bull break. Gift 24. Does sublingual Anavar circumvent any side effects? If so, you just suck on the tab and under the tongue until you grind it first. Well, how I would dose Anavar is I would crush the tablet and whatever dose that I was going to dose, and I would put the powder underneath my tongue and let it, let it dissolve in the blood vessels there. But will it circumvent side effects? No. No, I don't think so. If anything, probably if you did sublingual Anavar, you would get a little more side effects if you're prone to side effects with Anavar, because it's going to hit you a lot quicker. It's going to hit you quicker, and it's probably going to metabolize out of the system quicker, I would imagine. And you might get more side effects if that happens. So just something to consider. The crazy thing about the potency of Anavar is that you do not need to do this. Again, through my experimentation, I've fucking taken 2.5 milligrams. 25 is the normal dose, dude. I've taken 2.5 milligrams of Anavar several times and then gone to the gym. It fucking worked. I looked bigger instantly. I had a strong, good workout, felt strong, felt fucking great. And then my pump was insane, right? So, you don't need high doses of the shit, especially if it's pharmaceutical grade, which I have. I get it if you're getting UGL, you don't really know, that you'll have to figure out regarding the dose what ultimately makes sense. But I don't think this is going to prevent side effects if you do it sublingually. I just don't think that makes sense. Atheist. Nihilist. I saw an interesting Kurt Havens podcast where he said for muscle gains, generally speaking, total test should be above 1,400. Though he said the number varies between men. What do I think? I think that he's not far off. I think it's certainly going to vary for men. I'm at 700, but also I'm dosing some Anavar. For me, like with being able to gain muscle slowly over time on just test, it's got to be like 120 or above. Got to be 120 or above, and the further above you go from that, the more estrogen, needs to be just slightly modified kind of thing for me. I've got me and Jay from Ryan Root's podcast talked about this, and I'm going to bring Jay on. I want to invite Jay on so that we can discuss this, but there's actually some mechanistic reason why some men need lower estrogen than others. So you can't make these blanket statements about don't manage estrogen. We've been knowing intuitively that there's a difference between people. Some can tolerate higher. Some people just absolutely need it to be at fucking 20 and then their dick works and everything's good. And it appears as if this is a neurological based mechanism. Okay. There's a reason that some people need lower estrogen. Okay. I don't know where I was going with that, but something to keep in mind in that regard. I can put on muscle at 900. I can put on muscle really slowly at 700 total test. That's about as low as I would get. Where my muscle, putting on muscle mass with just test rapidly accelerated and was so much easier and I instantly fucking looked bigger and could lift more was on a long ester, 200 milligrams a week or more. And on cream, 5 pumps a day or more. And on prop, 280 milligrams a week or more. Yeah. Yep. There, I was able to put on, muscle quickly. But nothing beat in terms of rapidity of being able to put mass on. Nothing beat 420 of prop a week. That was 70, 7 times 7, 49. Yeah. No, 490 a week of prop. That was 70 milligrams every day of test prop. Nothing beat that. And then, that's second best. And then the best was 560 milligrams a week. So half a gram effectively of testosterone enanthate. I was injecting, I forget, 160 milligrams every other day or something, whatever that is. I was injecting every other day. And that was the best for anabolism for me, period. And there, in those cases, I was at 3,900, 4,000, 5,500 nanograms per deciliter. So above 1,400, though, you're going to be fucking good. You're going to be good. You can even do it at 900. Just got to work harder. Ever get convinced to try Tren microdose? Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, there's too much progestogenic signaling and otherwise potential prolactin interference that I do not want to fuck with at the moment. I'd rather not be taking fucking 0.25 milligrams carbergoline twice a week to control that. And I am also not in a place where I want to start fucking with my psyche at any level. I've worked with a lot of people over the years that have used that stuff, and I just understand how it can fuck with your psyche, and that's not something I want to do. Josh Walker, starting point for PFS recovery. Well, I just explained that. It would be, figuring out, it would be testosterone, exogenous tests, HCG. But then figuring out, do you need high levels of tests? You need to be sitting at 2,000 or so total tests, just, steroid levels of test and above. And can you use Masteron, Primo, or Aromasin to manage estrogen? Can you do that successfully? Because if you can, boom, you're going to be great. You're going to even be better. If you can't, because some people just can't get the doses right, and inhibiting enzymes, aromatase, is just not normal to do. You know, some people just need to be lowering estrogen naturally. Well, then you go on 100 milligrams of test a week. You dose 125 to 250 IU of HCG every day. And then you see where things kind of bottom out, you know. Add a little bit of DHEA. I think that is a very critical fucking hormone to have in people's TRT protocols. Something like 40 milligrams a day, 20 split in the morning, 20 split in the evening. And that's it for the hormones, you know. Yeah, PFS does not have to be that difficult. If you do all that, and you have your micronutrients straight, you're taking a B complex every day, you know, you're running some other powerful supplements, you're supporting thyroid hormones, but from desiccated thyroid or some natural stuff, or, you know, thyroid medication, or hopefully your thyroid's good. Maybe you could just take some selenium and you're good. And that still doesn't work. That's the time you bring in some exogenous DHT in addition to that stuff. You will still make gains with a T level of 400 if you are training, but gains without training, you need high total T. This depends, you know, it really depends on, I think, a person's genetics and a person's sort of like muscle tissue structure, ability, you know, bone mineral density, ability for muscle protein synthesis, which might be slowed down or somewhat inhibited or impaired or just not optimal for some individuals for whatever reason, in which case 400 tests is not going to, you know, 400 total testosterone nanograms per deciliter is not going to cut it for some individuals, you know? Yeah. Just as an example, I know an 18-year-old right now that likely has 500 to 700 total tests, maybe even more, can't build muscle. Eats fucking crazy, can't build muscle. You know, gets just liquid fucking dextro, just a powder dextrose, tries to, you know, do everything possible, can't build muscle. You know, that dude is probably going to need to go on some testosterone in order to do that. And that has to do with genes, among other things. You know, I feel like his dad, as an example, is not a muscular guy. So that's got to be genes. Simon Stone, what sort of test doses are clients who are using who are microdosing Arimidex as low as 0.03? You've mentioned in previous videos. Everything from 120 milligrams a week on the low end to 175 to 200 milligrams a week on the high end. This all depends on how people aromatize, man. So some people just like me don't really aromatize at all, but we're still like, I'm still a person via some neurologic mechanisms that were recently discovered by Ryan Root's guy, Jay. I'm one of those people that just genetically does better with lower estrogen. And there is a neurologic and otherwise mechanistic basis for why that happens. That's the next frontier in TRT science, by the way, is understanding. This is why I've intuitively known you can't give blanket statements around estrogen. Some people have actual defined mechanisms in the brain and possibly genes that explain why they need lower estrogen. You know, so it's different for different people, in other words. What is my personal sweet spot with SHBG? I've done fine at 19. I've done fine at 12. Last check, it was 12. So doing great. And that was about 2 months ago. It was 12, right? This is the kind of fear-mongery shit that people would be like, well, if you have 12 SHBG or you're running borderline low and you're not going to be using your test and your dick's not going to work and your libido, like, my dick fucking works all day. My libido is strong as fuck. I'm strong as fuck. I feel my testosterone. And my SHBG last check was 12. And now with a little bit of Anavar intermittently in the picture, it's probably a little lower than that. So, you know, you're still going to use your test and transport it. You know, you don't need to have fucking 20 SHBG, and 12 is not bad. Gift 24, there are various test compounding based creams. Which ones are the best? Versa and HRT is what I would assert. I mean, I'm not a huge like expert regarding, you know, the differences between the two of them. Yeah. 19 estrogen. It all depends. How do you feel? That's the answer. Like, your people can't gaslight themselves about how they feel best, you know? You know, if a guy's sitting at 75 total picograms per milliliter of estradiol and everything works phenomenally, that guy shouldn't gaslight himself into thinking he needs to lower estrogen. You know, and he shouldn't look at his protocol and be like, something's wrong because the number says 75. I've always acknowledged that, dude. People seem to forget that I have disclaimers like, you know, by the way, like I know some people can tolerate it. People just selectively fucking ignore some of the shit I say just so they can pick fights. Open your fucking eyes. 19 could be good for you as well. Atheist, for lifestyle users, what's the best compound to add to TRT Plus to get better look and increase gains? Almost always seems to be Anavar. but if it's not, when it's Decatrin, Winchell. Okay, listen. If you're doing TRT Plus and you want to, you know, get a better, more chiseled physique, it's going to be Winstrol Proviron. That's kind of it. And Winstrol is going to be substantially more powerful than Proviron. If you want sort of a baby version of Winstrol, just take Proviron. DHT itself is going to do that too. You'll have less subcutaneous tissue, less subcutaneous water on the shoulders, less subcutaneous water and tissue everywhere. You'll thin the layers of subcutaneous tissue in places where it matters the most, and you're going to be a lot more vascular as a result of even taking just DHT. Okay, even though it metabolizes out of the system fast. Winstrol, substantially more than that. Proviron, substantially less than Winstrol, but still is going to give you that kind of clean, dry look. Regarding mass, man, it's I think it's very fucking simple. The people want to use Tren and people want to use all this other shit. I think Primobolan's fucking amazing for that. Fucking amazing for it if you can make sure it doesn't kill your libido because it's going to inhibit some aromatase. But I really don't see, the best two things in my opinion are high dose test or whatever regular dose test, but Anavar. Oxandrolone is such a powerful anabolic agent that it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable that I can take 2.5 milligrams. This is a fucking baby dose. And go to the gym and feel like an animal. And put on muscle and like feel good and strong. And my physique like just looks crazy. On low doses of the shit. Anavar is really just fucking insane. Tony, on low dose prop and VAR, sex drive comes and goes. Can't find the sweet spot. Confidence is super low. Hey, brother. Well, I mean, I think you're on low dose prop here. What's the dose? Because here's the bottom line with that. Either the estrogen is out of your sweet spot or your dose of prop is not high enough. And that's essentially the answer. You know, so you've got to figure out which one of those things it is, and the only way to do that is to run laps. And you got to know where your sweet spot of estrogen is. You know, mine's 20 to 35, and 35 is kind of pushing it for me personally. And again, that we're finding that's based on some gene and potentially gene, but mostly neurological mechanisms that have not even been fucking elucidated to anyone. But people have found this to be true anecdotally. Some guys like, oh, I'm fine at 60 picograms per milliliter, you know, estradiol. Others, I can't be above 25. There's a reason for that. You know, so you got to find where you are, brother. Manifesting muscle. Hey, I'm 29, taking 140 milligrams sip twice a week. All right, so you're on 280 or you're on 140 total. Please clarify when you guys say that stuff. 25 milligrams Anavar a day, split 2 times. So that's, you know, 12 and a half and 12 and a half. Total test was 1,000. Okay, so you're on 140 a week. Free test 36 to 7 and estradiol 42. Thoughts? Thoughts on what though? You know, on what? Is sex drive failing? Is libido, is our erections failing? I don't see any problem with where you're at so long as you feel good. I mean, I think those numbers are fine. You know, are fine. You know, that SHBG, you don't want it to go below 5 is what I would try to shoot for. It might be the case that you get to 5 and you're fine. Or you're 4 and you're fine. But as to not push the, just like you wouldn't want to take prolactin down to 2. I've done it. 1.7 nanograms per milliliter was the lowest it ever got. No side effects whatsoever. I mean, there's no disease in the medical literature associated with low prolactin in males. There isn't one. It doesn't exist. But you probably don't want to take that SHBG below 5. Otherwise, I think this is fine. But also, what's happening? What supplements do you use? Thank you. Right now, I dose big B complex. It's called Bioactive B complex from, I think, Life Extension in the morning. And that's just a critical staple in my regimen. I'm dosing at the moment because I got my girlfriend on pharmaceutical or compounded porcine desiccated thyroid, so it's a little more powerful than the supplemental stuff that I was buying from New Zealand. So I take a capsule of that every day. I am taking 6,000 IU of vitamin D every morning. I am running 20 milligrams of oral DHEA, micronized DHEA every morning. I'm trying to think supplement-wise. There's not a whole lot in the regimen at this point. I take about 2 grams, I want to say, of lecithin. It's sunflower lecithin that really does help ejaculate volume, even though I'm on HCG. And I think at this point, like, that's kind of it for supplements. Yeah, I'm not dosing a ton of supplements at the moment. An additional 20 milligrams of micronized DHEA at 4 or 5 p.m. Yeah, and that's essentially it. Sometimes if I need a little bit of extra energy, if for whatever reason it's kind of failing, then an extra half of a bioactive B complex later on in the day actually helps support cognition pretty well. Manifesting muscle, also libido very low, not much sexual desire, and dropped Anavar to 12.5 milligrams split twice a day on clomiphene with your test injection. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think if your issue is that libido is not good, it's probably because you're taking clomid. That's why. You're blocking estrogen receptors. That's just not going to be good for libido typically. Here's a good point. GIF 24. For years, the medical community has blamed DHT on BPH. But in your opinion, is the DHT or an elevated estrogen and lower testosterone levels as men get older, which causes it, wouldn't DHT help? The scientific literature at this point suggests very clearly that it's estrogen. It's just estrogen. That it's estrogen exposure. I'm pretty sure it's estrogen receptor alpha binding and expression in the prostate that is causing prostate growth, and not DHT or TAS. So I think that to be true. I've read and interpreted a lot of the scientific literature on this, and to me, it seems very clear it's estrogen, and what, you know, specifically ERA. I don't think it's ERB, but I might be wrong. It's one of the estrogen receptors being activated that is causing this to happen, which would make perfect sense, right? Because, you know, tumors and ultimate effective tissue growth is, as you know, in these contexts, tumors, etc. It's always fucking estrogen driven. So, I mean, I don't know why people are questioning that. Do I think there's any truth to those with higher levels use up more testosterone? When I was training for a jiu-jitsu competition, I did not feel the usual. Higher activity levels. Okay, use up more testosterone. I think certainly. I mean, just listen, testosterone is a fueling source for men for doing physical shit. Just like acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, is a fueling source for you to be doing, let's call it, executing muscular contractions and moving your body, moving your muscles, right? It sort of fuels that. So, yeah, I mean, there might be something to say that, like, if you're using more of the test, or at least some of the effects of the test are being utilized, like strength and cardiovascular capacity and muscle, you know, protein synthesis and stuff like that. If you're working out more, I think there's just no question about that. Adrian says someone's SHBG is too low, probably why you feel terrible, no libido. That's what the internet's going to tell you. I've not found that to be true in fucking any case ever, in practice ever, with any client ever. Okay? You ought to take a look at what you believe to be true on the internet. Never have I seen low SHBG cause libido problems. Never. Some of these SHBGs are below range. Never saw it cause any fucking problems. Don't believe what you see on the internet, in text, in a forum. Don't believe everything. And don't accept things as norms. You know, oh, enough people said this. 200 milligrams a week is a cycle. It's fucking horseshit. People are different, dude. Effects of TRT, confidence, androgenicity. Hell yeah. GIF, tried a little salt palmetto in the past. Was not a good decision. I was sensitive in that my libido tanked big time. That happens. I mean, that's reducing DHT. What are safer, better options to prevent further prostate enlargement and reverse? Make sure that you don't have a lot of estrogen receptor binding. Yeah, that's what's happening. What does THC smoking marijuana do to DHT? Pregnant loan? Guy's got a pregnant loan, just a fat ass loan. Progesterone and sensitivity to the penis tissue. Well, so I know what you're getting at, and the question is just worded a little awkwardly, but I think what you're getting at is why could THC, blunt libido or blunt climax or something to this effect? And I think the answer to that question is it can, and probably. Because the literature on this is actually back and forth. You've got cases in which it doesn't really do anything to systemic prolactin, and then in cases where it does actually raise prolactin. So probably what's happening is you're getting a temporary, like an acute increase in serum prolactin levels, and that is going to fuck with everything. Sensitivity, libido, ability to climax, the whole 9 yards. Basically, the entirety of the sexual system gets fucked up by prolactin. So. Atheist Nihilist, how have you kept your hair? Definitely not blessed with hair genetics. Does finasteride mineralize dutasteride mess things up on TRT? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it does. Yeah, you're on TRT at 150 milligrams a week and you take dutasteride or finasteride, you're going to stop some of that DHT conversion, dude. Is it going to fuck you? Is it going to fuck you like it does some of these guys on PFS? Rolling the dice, brother. Don't know, right? You're rolling the dice. You should know, though, that if you sit a coach like me down who's seen thousands of dudes, I caught a lot of them that got full-blown PFS from one tablet of finasteride. Like one pill. Full-blown PFS. Probably just semi-permanently damaged the fucking 5ARs. And, that needed repair. Or supplementation with actual DHT. Or enough test to make it happen in controlling estrogen. So, answer your question how I kept my hair. Lots of tocotrienols, lots of derma rolling, and I do not stay on shit that causes hair loss very long, which would be, high dose prop causes hair loss. I mean, my hair would be pretty fried if I was stayed on anything above 250 a week of prop. I think my hair would be fried. So there's that. And otherwise, I don't stay on protocols like that. If I take even 12.5 milligrams of Proviron a day, my hair starts to fucking fry, dude. Proviron will fry it, dude. It does. Now I'm on a very little bit of Anavar and 100 milligrams of test. My hair isn't going anywhere, dude. And the Anavar is doing nothing, by the way, for hair causing hair loss. Just doing nothing, thankfully. Tried 1.25 milligrams brand name Cialis after about 2 weeks, starting getting generalized muscle pain in the legs. Yeah, that happens. That happens because, blood pools in different areas. It's pulled kind of more toward the penis in that situation. So it might be having a little blood loss in legs. I can't explain exactly why that happens, but that's probably what it is. 1.25 milligrams of brand name Cialis. Well, I guess because that shit's probably more potent than the generic shit. Might do that, but that's still low dose. Do I use protein powder or multivitamin? No multivitamin, no protein powder. Yes, tocotrienols. Corey, what's up? Any new thoughts on probiotics? I'm doing a high-dose B1 protocol along with B-complex after some post-viral stuff and seeing a benefit. Think about what to add next. Do I have any thoughts on probiotics? No, not really. A lot of them just don't colonize. Excuse me. My nose tickled. Yeah, a lot of probiotics are not going to colonize in the large gut, the large bowel. The large colon. So like, they're going to be transiently effective and then useless when you get them out of your system. That's just how that ends up working. Yeah. I'd say probably the most effective probiotic is if you can get your hands on Bifidobacterium longum, LONGUM, BB536 would be the identifier. Heard PSA test is highly inaccurate. I don't know. Not my specialty. Adrian was a heavy stoner for over 5 years. Completely fucked my hormones. Absolutely. Again, yeah, it's going to raise prolactin. There's some estrogenic signaling that happens there. There might be some inhibition of luteinizing hormone secretion from the use of fucking pot. So, yeah, man. I would tell you this, if you like, some people are just immune to shit like that. Can just blaze reefer all day and they're totally fine and it doesn't fuck with anything. My uncle's like that, or was like that. He since contracted Lyme disease and it really fucked with him. but used to just smoke pot all day. It didn't fuck with him at all. He was just happy and stoned all day. And so, but some people like can take 2 hits from a one hitter and then they can't climax. You know, I mean, it's just going to be different for different people, man. It's just going to be different for different people. And or inject to the glutes, 25 gauge, 1.5 inch or 1 inch or better. If you're going to hit the glutes, all you really need is a 5/8 inch needle. So I got those from Amazon to run daily injections of 14 milligrams a day, totaling 98 milligrams a week or 100. And I'm hitting the muscle with those. Yeah. But I feel much better about the 5/8 inch, that little bit extra length than a half inch. You know, I just feel much better about that. And I can feel it. You know, you have that dull pain when you hit the fucking muscle and you know it. If you're using the regular insulin syringes, you know, half an inch, are you getting that dull pain? You should know what it feels like to hit the muscle. Are you actually getting that? Or are you doing sub-Q and barely touching the muscle and getting maybe a little bit into the vascular tissue? And you get this hybrid where it's some sub-Q and some, you know, hitting the vascular tissue. 5/8 inch or more, boys. Just to be safe. 5/8 inch or more. Just to be safe. Not test related. Do you have any experience with Strattera? It seems to increase dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. No, I do not. No, I think, you know, it's a good idea to stay away from, you know, any reuptake inhibitor or things that are increasing the concentrations of shit. If it's coming from big pharma, you know, they still haven't figured out how to make drugs that do positive things that are very effective, but that don't fucking cause a host of side effects, you know, and shit down the line that can be really, really problematic. You know, that could induce quality of life, negative quality of life changes that last a long time. They still haven't figured that out yet. So, brother, tread lightly. That's what I'd say. What to do about smoking weed? Shasandra good enough for prolactin control? Well, if you are a pothead, then I think you should probably look at taking Shasandra plus P5P and maybe some vitamin E. Yep. Is Lodo's CBD oil okay long-term? It doesn't mess with hormones. I think it's actually just THC that fucks with, you know, hormones, prolactin specifically, but probably test and estrogen to an extent. CBD seems a little less, you know, consequential in this case, is what I would say. Brother. How many blood tests do I do on myself in a year? I don't know, rough estimation, like 50 to 60. T3 dosage for TRT. Not an expert on dosage as of T3. I have a few guys that take it, you know. Can't really extrapolate to a general recommendation for people in that very sort of minor subset of individuals that I've observed over the years. So can't really give you an answer there, brother. But I can tell you this, that like thyroid hormones, or just taking something that's really powerful that optimizes them, like a porcine desiccated or a good quality desiccated thyroid supplement or good quality pharmaceutical grade compounded desiccated thyroid, will make a world of difference. Yeah, specifically in kind of down-regulating aromatase activity, but also, you know, I think there are a lot of neurological mechanisms and some other mechanisms that the thyroid hormones very much interplay with the sexual system regarding. So, you know, you want them to be as good as they can be, for fucking sure. For fucking sure, man. I noticed that Vigorous Steve is not doing any live streams, so I've just experimentally moved the live stream to, you know, 1 p.m. here. We'll see how it works out moving forward. We used to do them at 9 a.m. It's unlikely that I'll be doing those at 9 a.m. on Saturday, at least for the foreseeable future. So we'll see if I can add another live stream to sort of compensate for that during the middle of the week. You know, call it somewhere around 3 to 5 p.m. on a weekday, like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Then I will do that. I think it, you know, I would like to try doing that to see how that kind of works, and I guess we'll go from there. In the meantime, I'm going to end the stream, boys. I am pretty busy right now regarding coaching, but I do have slots open. Okay, so whether it's TRT protocol restructuring, right, the one-off call with me, or listen, the sexual dysfunction stuff, it takes multiple protocol adjustments. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of feedback, a lot of real analysis of what's happening. So you got to book me for at least 3 months or 6 months if you've got PFS or just long-standing libido and erection issues. If you have the budget and you're on HRT, TRT, and still can't dial in the sexual stuff, we're gonna need some time. Yeah, if you have the budget, better to do the time. I want the business, of course. I'm not Mother Teresa, but it's going to be better to do the time. All right, so book a 3-month or 6-month or more at livecortex.com. Buy the Torque Stack, livecortex.com, the best nootropic on the market. Plenty of courses. Launching TRT Protocol Mastery. Video course lays everything out. How to adjust any protocol to reach specifically anabolism, energy, all the good stuff, but libido and erections. TRT Protocol Mastery coming soon. Look forward to that. Working on it as we speak. It's going to launch soon enough. Kick ass. Rock on. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Great week coming up. I'll see you guys Monday or Tuesday for content. And I love you. Bye-bye. 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 Thank you. Thank you, brother. Maybe. Guess we'll see. Peace out, boys.